For some, it's a punchline. For others, a lifeline. It's been mocked, misunderstood, commercialized, and buried, and yet it refuses to disappear. But it didn't all start with black eyeliner or Hot Topic. It began in sweaty basements with political anger and emotional honesty, long before it became a cultural phenomenon. This is emo. So what is emo? Where did it come from, and how did it become one of the most divisive genres in music history? The word emo comes from emotional hardcore, a term that would later haunt nearly every band associated with it. At its core, emo is not about fashion, not about sadness. It's about emotional vulnerability in a genre that once rejected it. Key characteristics of emo music include confessional, deeply personal lyrics, dynamic shifts between soft and loud, intimate vocals often cracking, shouting, or whispered, and a focus on internal struggle rather than external rebellion. But emo was never one sound. It's a family of movements, each reacting to the one before, and it's all a bit weird, terminology-wise. So let's start off with the first wave of emo, emotional hardcore. We're looking at 1985 to 1990, sorta. Emo begins in the mid-1980s in Washington, D.C., in the hardcore punk scene. Hardcore is aggressive, political, and rigid, but some bands wanted something different, something a little bit more human. Enter Rites of Spring. Their songs were still fast and loud, but the lyrics were introspective, about memory, fear, and identity. Guy Picciotto, their frontman, screamed not in anger, but in emotional release. Other key bands include Embrace, that were fronted by Ian MacKaye, Dag Nasty or Grey Matter. This era wasn't called emo by the bands themselves. The label was often used mockingly. But something had changed. Hardcore had now learned how to feel, at least anything but angry. When we enter the 90s, we enter the second wave of emo, Midwest emo. In the 1990s, emo left the city basements and moved into bedrooms, garages, and college towns. This is Midwest emo. The sound changes. It's now more clean, intricate guitar lines, unusual time signatures. The vocals are softer and the lyrics are more poetic. Emotion wasn't screamed anymore, it was now confessed, laid bare, as if presented to a listener. Defining bands of the time were Sunny Day Real Estate, American Football, The Promise Ring, Mineral, or Captain Jazz. Sunny Day Real Estate's 1994 album Diary became a blueprint, melodic, dramatic, and deeply personal. American Football perfected the quiet ache of nostalgia, songs that sounded like late nights and unfinished sentences and half-smoked cigarettes. This era cemented emo as introspective and musical, but still underground. But as we all know, that wouldn't last. The third wave of emo hits. Emo goes mainstream. By the early 2000s, emo exploded. Now this was the time when I was in high school, or the German equivalent of high school, and emo was everywhere. Pop punk, post-hardcore, and emo collided, and suddenly vulnerability had hooks. This was the era most people think of when they hear the word emo, I think. Key bands are My Chemical Romance, Fall Out Boy, Dashboard Confessional, Jimmy Eat World, Taking Back Sunday. Some bands that now fall under the emo category are like Blink-182 or Sum 41, that back then would have just been classified as pop punk. Dashboard Confessional made emo acoustic and intimate. Songs that felt like diary entries sung directly for you. My Chemical Romance turned emo into theatre, grand concepts, dramatic imagery, and emotional extremes, where Jimmy Eat World's The Middle proved emo could be hopeful and also dominate radio. But with mainstream success also comes the usual backlash that everybody from Nirvana to Metallica has felt. Emo became a stereotype. It was overly dramatic, it was super commercial, it was fake, and by the end of the decade the genre collapsed under its own image. After the collapse of mainstream commercialized emo in the 2010s, we now move into the fourth wave, emo revival. The 2010s emo was quietly reborn. The emo revival returned to the DIY core aesthetics and ethics, and also its Midwest influences, while embracing modern themes. Bands like The World is a Beautiful Place and I Am No Longer Afraid to Die, or Modern Baseball, Title Fight, Joyce Manor, and Foxing blended emo with indie rock, math rock, and post-hardcore influences. Lyrics focused more on mental health, on becoming an adult, or adulthood in general, on burnout and nostalgia. All very 2010s themes. There were no costumes, there was no MTV, it was just young adults playing music they knew how to play, honestly. Where are we today? What is emo now? Emo is pretty much everywhere nowadays. It's hidden in pop music, it's in hip hop, it's in bedroom producers and on SoundCloud rappers. It's artists like Lil Peep and Juice WRLD borrowed emo's emotional DNA, bringing it into a new generation. Because emo was never about a sound. It was about a permission to feel deeply and honestly and openly without shame. So why does emo matter? It's been ridiculed, it's been misrepresented, but it undeniably has saved lives. I know of at least a handful of people who would not be around us anymore if it hadn't been for the music they found when they were teens. It told kids they were not alone, that their feelings mattered, and that their vulnerability wasn't weakness. And no matter how many times it's declared dead, emo always comes back. Because Mom, this was never just a phase. Alright, this was a short-ish episode of the 26 for 26 series. We're already in week 5. It's incredible. The weeks just are flying by. Next week, we're looking at funk. I've talked about how to funkify your riffs for guitar players, but I don't think I've ever talked about the origins of slap bass. I've never talked about how slap bass influenced modern rock music and how funk roots are basically everywhere now. So next week, we're talking about funk. See you then. Bye.